Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 10 Part 26 based on novel. So let's start. A young man hovered in midair while a warm jade color flickered on the surface of his skin. If one was to observe carefully, one would be able to see through his skin. Under his skin was a crystal jade-like skeleton. The pressure that permeated this place originated from his skeleton. Many individuals standing around the dragon transformation pool were staring in shock at that young man. However, none of them dared to speak owing to that pressure. In fact, their faces were filled with shock, revealing the waves churning within their hearts. Hovering in the sky, Lin Dong's gently shut eyes also slowly opened up. Following which, the white light undulated on his skin gradually faded. Finally, it became calm once again. The pressure had disappeared completely. Opening his eyes, Lin Dong immediately saw many pairs of eyes scattered across the mountain, staring back at him. He was startled as he quickly laughed in a dry and unnatural manner. Standing on a mountaintop, Yuan Qian also recovered his senses at this moment. His eyes wore a complicated expression as he glanced at Lin Dong, who was hovering in the sky. After which, he turned his head and exchanged glances with the elders behind him. Their faces were also complicated and mysterious. "Everyone, please be dismissed." Yuan Qian mused for a moment. His eyes looked around him before he finally opened his mouth to speak. Those members of the dragon tribe finally began to leave after hearing Yuan Qian's orders. However, there were still some whisperings as they left. Clearly, their hearts were not at peace. After the ordinary members of the dragon tribe left, the elders stayed behind instead. Their tensed faces caused Lin Dong to gulp softly in his heart. At this moment, he was naturally aware of the magnitude of the gift that he had received from the dragon transformation pool. That was because there was only one set of primal dragon bone in the entire dragon tribe. However, that only set was now taken by a person without any dragon tribe bloodline. It was likely that the emotions in the hearts of these members of the dragon tribe were extremely interesting at the moment. "Young friend Lin Dong, please come down and have a chat." Yuan Qian looked at Lin Dong and smilingly said. Lin Dong nodded and landed on the ground. His face appeared calm, but there was a caution deep within his eyes. Although he had taken great advantage of the dragon tribe by obtaining the primal dragon bone, he would definitely not hand it over. Otherwise, his training foundation would be severely damaged. "Haha, young friend Lin Dong, there is no need to worry. Even though the primal dragon bone is an important treasure of our dragon tribe, we are not a barbaric tribe." Yuan Qian's eyes were sharp. Although Lin Dong hid the caution in his eyes, he was still able to detect it. Hence, he immediately comforted him with a smile. Lin Dong felt a little embarrassed upon hearing this. Following which, his body gradually relaxed. It seems like young friend Lin Dong has obtained a great reward. Yuan Qian swept his eyes over Lin Dong and said. Lin Dong nodded. Even with his calm temperament, he involuntarily grinned upon thinking of the rewards he had received. After all, he had indeed reaped significant benefits. Not only did the skeleton in his body transform into the most powerful primal dragon bone, but his strength had also soared. In fact, he had directly stepped into the peak of the advanced profound death stage, and even his mental energy had reached the peak divine symbol master from the advanced divine symbol master. If he advanced a little further, he would have broken through the divine symbol master and advanced into the legendary symbol grandmaster, which was comparable to a samsara stage expert. Only after reaching that level would the might of one's mental energy be slowly displayed. Most people in this world practiced Yuan power. At the same time, there were also some who practiced both at the same time. Although there might be some individuals who were able to obtain significant accomplishments in their Yuan power cultivation, when it came to mental energy cultivation, it was extremely rare to find someone who was able to break the mold and reach the legendary Grandmaster level. As a result, many of them were stuck after reaching the peak of the advanced divine symbol master, and they had no choice but to give up and focus on their Yuan power cultivation instead. Fortunately, with the help of their mental energy, they were far more efficient in their Yuan power cultivation. If one was to evaluate the present Lin Dong, unless he was facing some individuals who possess unique techniques, there were hardly any profound death stage experts that could match up to him. Moreover, if he unleashed his full strength, it was even possible for him to contend against a samsara stage expert. In fact, he would no longer be caught in embarrassing situations, whereby he could only rely on a few powerful techniques to threaten a samsara stage expert, like he did in the past. Therefore, he had reaped significant rewards during this trip to the Dragon Transformation Pool. It was sufficient for Lin Dong to part his lips and laugh out loud. "You met our ancestor in the Bone Burial Hall, am I right?" Yuan Chen looked at Lin Dong. Those Dragon Tribe's elders stared at Lin Dong after he uttered those words. Lin Dong could only nod his head upon seeing this formation. "You defeated the will of the ancestor?" Yuan Qian's eyes widened slightly. Even his tone became a little higher. It was likely that this was quite a shocking fact, even to someone like him. After all, he was once suppressed and destroyed by the will of the Six-Finger Sage Dragon Emperor. "I summoned the will of the Devouring Master." Lin Dong shrugged his shoulder. He knew that it was virtually impossible for him to defeat the will of the Six-Finger Sage Dragon Emperor on his own. At the very least, he was currently unable to do so. "I see." Yuan Qian and the others sighed in relief after hearing these words. If this was the case, it was still possible for them to accept it. "In that case, have you really obtained the primal dragon bone?" An elder of the dragon tribe involuntarily asked a superfluous question. His old face suddenly reddened after his words sounded. It was likely that he also realized that his question was superfluous. "Tribe leader, this is an important matter," another elder sighed. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "If young friend Lin Dong is willing to return the primal dragon bone, we are willing to pay any price for it. Elder, you should be aware how detrimental it would be if you remove the dragon bones from my body. Perhaps I will have difficulties making progress in my cultivation in the future." Lin Dong's expression changed slightly. He took a step back as he spoke in a deep voice. "Young friend Lin Dong, there is no need to worry," Yuan Qian hurriedly said. "However, the primal dragon bone is an important treasure of our dragon tribe. Although young friend Lin Dong performed a great deed for our dragon tribe, he is ultimately not a member of our tribe," an elder involuntarily spoke in a deep voice. "Aren't we turning into ungrateful individuals if we force him to surrender the primal dragon bone?" Some elders opposed his opinion. "However, this is a major matter." Yuan Qian looked at the elders, who were arguing bitterly over this matter, before he quickly glanced at a wary Lin Dong. It was likely that he had also ended up with a headache because of this matter. Things would be all right if Lin Dong had merely obtained the ancient dragon bone. Although it was relatively rare, it was still acceptable to these elders. Unfortunately, he had obtained the primal dragon bone, for which there was only one set in the entire dragon tribe. The dragon tribe is actually arguing to such an extent because of the primal dragon bone. "Are you trying to turn us into a joke?" An exceptionally old voice suddenly resounded across the sky while the upper echelons of the dragon tribe were bickering. Upon hearing this voice, not only did those elders suddenly shut their mouths, but even Yuan Qian lifted his head in shock. He looked at the sky and exclaimed, "Grand Elder!" Lin Dong lifted his head. He could see the space at that spot suddenly becoming distorted. Following which, an old man holding a walking stick strangely appeared in his sight. Based on the expressions of Yuan Qian's group, this old man clearly possessed an extremely senior position. However, he possessed a smooth, youth-like skin and his eyes were exceptionally deep. There was a vague reincarnation ripple surrounding him, and that fluctuation was even stronger than Yuan Qian. In fact, it did not lose out to Qing Shi. "Greetings to the Grand Elder." Those elders hurriedly bowed and greeted him upon seeing this. They had an even more respectful attitude compared to when they were facing Yuan Qian. "Grand Elder, you came out of your seclusion?" Yuan Qian asked joyfully. "If I do not appear, I'm afraid that our dragon tribe would have completely thrown away its face," the old man with a walking stick said. This caused those elders from before, who wanted to ask Lin Dong to surrender his dragon bones, to become embarrassed. "Grand Elder, this matter," Yuan Qian spoke with a bitter smile. The old man with the walking stick waved his hand. After which, his extremely deep eyes, which seemed to have seen through reincarnation, looked at Lin Dong. His eyes randomly swept downwards before nodding. An emotional expression appeared on his elderly face. It is really unexpected that the primal dragon bone would end up being obtained by someone outside the tribe. As Lin Dong did not know the agenda of this mysterious Grand Elder, he did not speak up. All he did was cup his hands together. The primal dragon bone is indeed an extremely important treasure of our dragon tribe. However, it is precisely because it was far too important that no one in our dragon tribe has managed to obtain it. Since you managed to do so, it seems like you must have some affinity with it. Moreover, we do not dare to object to something that even the ancestor has agreed upon. The old man with a walking stick slowly said. However, he is not a member of our dragon tribe, an elder spoke hesitantly. If we stick to our pedantic ways, perhaps our dragon tribe will eventually end up declining like the other overlord tribes. The old man holding onto a walking stick spoke in a faint voice. Immediately, he paused and looked at Lin Dong. Young friend, may I know if you will object to becoming an elder of our dragon tribe? Lin Dong's heart rejoiced slightly upon hearing this. He hurriedly said, I am more than willing to do so. Lin Dong was naturally able to tell that this Grand Elder, who possessed an extremely high status in the dragon tribe, was trying to help him. The old man with the walking stick nodded. Following which, 5 colored light gathered in his hand and directly transformed into a purple gold dragon seal. Meanwhile, there was frightening ripples being emitted from that dragon seal. Young friend, this is the punishment dragon seal of our dragon tribe. It controls punishments and you will have the authority to punish any member of the dragon tribe. From today onwards, you will be a trusted punishment elder of our dragon tribe. Lin Dong was startled. He was not familiar with this so-called punishment dragon seal. However, he could tell that even the expressions of those elders from the dragon tribe and Yuan Qian had changed at this moment. Punishment elder. Lin Dong looked at the purple gold dragon seal on the palm of the Grand Elder of the dragon tribe, before he turned to look at Yuan Qian's group, who had a change in their expressions. Immediately, he came to a comprehension. It turns out this so-called punishment elder was not just an empty title, like he had imagined. Grand Elder, the punishment elder wields huge authority. Isn't it a little inappropriate to hand it to an outsider? An elder involuntarily asked. The punishment elder held great authority. Strictly speaking, he was ranked even a little higher than these elders. In the past, this position was usually held by a reputable individual in their dragon tribe. For example, the previous punishment elder was Qing Shi. However, he subsequently retired and this position became vacant. However, right now, this position was actually handed over to a human without any dragon tribe bloodline. Therefore, this inevitably caused them to be bewildered. The remaining elders exchanged glances with each other and even Yuan Qian was in a state of mild disbelief. As of now, the Grand Elder had taken the punishment seal out. Hence, once Lin Dong had the seal, notwithstanding the dragon tribe members, anyone who possessed even the slightest dragon bloodline would be suppressed by it. After all, this was an object that was unique to the punishment elder. Like I said, insisting on our pedantic ways will only lead to our downfall. The Grand Elder spoke in a faint voice. He waved his hand towards Yuan Qian's group. After which, he looked at Lin Dong and smiled. Young friend Lin Dong, are you willing to become the new punishment elder of our dragon tribe? Lin Dong stared at this mysterious Grand Elder, who appeared warm and friendly, before he parted his lips into a smile. In his heart, however, he secretly mused that Willy foxes grow more cunning with age, the same way that ginger becomes spicier the older it gets. Clearly, the latter knew how crucial the primal dragon bone was to the dragon tribe. However, he also knew that it was extremely unjustified and difficult to get Lin Dong to surrender the primal dragon bone. Since this was the case, it was better to directly pull Lin Dong into the dragon tribe. The so-called punishment elder might possess great authority, but the dragon tribe would naturally have ways to deal with it if Lin Dong really abused the punishment seal. As such, they were able to keep the primal dragon bone in their dragon tribe without paying a hefty price. Nonetheless, Lin Dong was still surprised by the generosity of the Grand Elder, as he directly allowed Lin Dong to become the dragon tribe's punishment elder. Originally, he thought that most of these ancient tribes were extremely strict and always stuck to the rules. Since the Grand Elder has spoken, I naturally do not dare to object. Lin Dong cupped his hands together and said respectfully. Perhaps this was indeed a good way to resolve the current situation. Otherwise, these elders would be truly unwilling to allow the primal dragon bone to land in the hands of someone who was completely unrelated to their dragon tribe. Moreover, becoming closer to the dragon tribe was something that would only bring benefits to Lin Dong. As one of the 4 overlord tribes, their name held quite a great deterrence in the demonic beast world. It was likely that the Heaven Dragon Demon Commander would be stunned if news of this matter spreads to the Beast War region. Lin Dong, who possessed the punishment seal, would likely have little difficulties dealing with the 6-winged flying dragon, who had an impure bloodline. When he saw this, a smile immediately appeared on the elderly face of the Grand Elder. Following which, he said, "In the future, you shall be the punishment elder of our dragon tribe. You should learn the rules of our dragon tribe when you have the time." Lin Dong nodded nonchalantly. He also knew that even though the punishment elder held some actual authority, he did not have the qualifications to interfere in the matters of the dragon tribe. Additionally, he did not have the time to bother about these matters. Everyone was clearly aware that giving him this title was simply a way to connect him to the dragon tribe. Meanwhile, he was also able to successfully obtain the primal dragon bone, and he could occasionally whip out the punishment seal to take advantage of the dragon tribe's authority to bully others. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave first. Perhaps I will be leaving the dragon tribe in the next 2 days. Lin Dong looked at Yuan Chen. He had already completed the most important objective for coming to the dragon tribe, and there was no need to stay any further. Furthermore, there were still some problems to deal with back in the Beast War region. Moreover, he did not know if little Martin had returned to the celestial demon Martin tribe and whether the latter needed his help. Yuan Chen glanced at the Grand Elder. The latter nodded before he waved his hand. "Duan Dao, you should take young friend Lin Dong to have a rest for today. Please send him off if he wants to leave." "Understood." Standing at the back, Duan Dao respectfully acknowledged the order. After which, he smilingly said to Lin Dong, "Let's go, Elder Lin Dong." Lin Dong involuntarily smiled bitterly when he heard that strange form of address. He once again cupped his hands and bowed to everyone present. After which, he turned around and left. The many elders on the mountain quietly sighed when they saw Lin Dong turning around to leave. The emergence of the primal dragon bone in this world was supposed to be a major event for their dragon tribe. Who would have expected it to end up like this? This little fellow is extraordinary. Do not think that he has taken advantage of our dragon tribe. Who knows what will happen in the future? The Grand Elder narrowed his eyes. His eyes contained great depth and wisdom. He softly said, "Being able to summon the will of the devouring master. This is not something that an ordinary person can do. Treat him as a genuine elder of our dragon tribe in the future and pay him due respect. No one can disobey this order." The Grand Elder's eyes turned towards the various elders of the dragon tribe before his voice became a little grave. The elders did not object upon hearing this. All they did was to respectfully acknowledge the order. The next day, Lin Dong saw Duan Dao waiting for him after he walked out of his room. When the latter saw him, he came forward to greet him with a smile. In fact, he appeared much friendlier than before, and there was even a tinge of respect in his demeanor. News that Lin Dong had obtained the primal dragon bone had already spread within the dragon tribe. This naturally created quite a big commotion. This was especially the case after others learned that even the Grand Elder had showed up and appointed Lin Dong as the new punishment elder of their dragon tribe. News about this matter spread uncontrollably from one ear to another. It was likely that this was the first time in the history of the dragon tribe that an outsider had taken the position of punishment elder. "Young brother Lin Dong, are you planning on leaving?" Duan Dao smiled towards Lin Dong and asked. "There are still some matters back in the Beast War region that I need to handle. Hence, I will have to make a trip back." Lin Dong shook his head. Although the Deep Lightning Mountain's position and reputation in the Beast War region was no longer inferior to that of the three great demon commanders after the battle at the Divine Item Mountain range, its foundation was still quite weak. Therefore, he would have to put in more effort. After all, the Deep Lightning Mountain would be the foundation backing them three brothers when they charged back to the Eastern Xian region. Duan Dao ceased obstructing Lin Dong upon hearing this. He nodded and said, "In that case, please leave. The spatial teleportation array has already been prepared. It will be able to send young brother Lin Dong back to the Beast War region swiftly." Duan Dao turned around and led the way after his voice sounded. Lin Dong followed closely behind. The two of them shuttled through the dragon tribe. Along the way, they met many members of the tribe. However, these people all had strange expressions upon seeing Lin Dong. Deep within their originally proud eyes was a trace of fear. This caused Lin Dong to be a little stunned. It seems like this punishment elder was really no ordinary position in the dragon tribe. The both of them finally arrived at the top of a mountain. The spatial ripple in this area had already become chaotic. Moreover, Lin Dong could see Yuan Qian's presence here. The tribe leader of the dragon tribe was actually sending him off personally. "Haha, young friend Lin Dong, you might not possess the dragon tribe's bloodline, but you possess a set of dragon bones. From a certain point of view, you can be considered as a member of our dragon tribe." Yuan Qian's originally stern face was covered with smiles as he looked at Lin Dong. "This junior has taken advantage of your tribe this time around. If the dragon tribe needs my help in the future, I will definitely do my best to help." Lin Dong cupped his hands together and spoke solemnly. He always made things clear when it came to kindness and enmity. If the dragon tribe insisted on creating problems for him because of the primal dragon bone, he might not care about them in the future. However, the dragon tribe had taken the best measure to accommodate him. This undoubtedly left Lin Dong with a good impression of them. From another point of view, it must be said that the Grand Elder was really impressive and wise. His gentle tactics allowed their dragon tribe to end up with a friend that possessed frightening potential. Although the current strength of this ally was unable to impress the dragon tribe, it was possible that the powerful dragon tribe might have to rely on Lin Dong's protection in the future. After all, who could predict the future? Yuan Qian was quite satisfied with Lin Dong's words as he smiled and nodded. After which, he clenched his hand, before a palm-sized golden totem appeared. He handed it to Lin Dong. "You are to be considered as a member of our dragon tribe in the future. This is something that the Grand Elder has asked me to hand to you. You can shatter it if you run into any major problems in the future, and our dragon tribe will come to your aid." Lin Dong involuntarily smiled upon hearing this. The Grand Elder was really thoughtful. However, it was likely that he was much more concerned about the primal dragon bone in Lin Dong's body. After all, if Lin Dong met with any mishaps, his primal dragon bone might end up in the hands of others. Disregarding the matter of whether that person could endure the overbearing strength of the primal dragon bone, just losing the primal dragon bone alone was already an extremely huge loss for the dragon tribe. However, Lin Dong did not care about whether the Grand Elder was concerned about him or the primal dragon bone. In any case, he understood that from today onwards, he had quite a close relationship with the dragon tribe, and it would be a waste if he did not use this relationship. The teleportation array is almost completed. Yuan Qian turned his head to look at the distorted space, after Lin Dong accepted the totem, and said with a smile. Lin Dong nodded. He once again cupped his hands together towards Yuan Qian in a solemn fashion. Then, he spoke in a deep voice, "This junior bids everyone goodbye." He did not hesitate any longer after speaking. He turned around before he directly shot into the distorted space. A wild and violent spatial fluctuation spread, and his body became increasingly distorted within. Finally, he completely vanished. The chaotic spatial ripple over the mountain gradually calmed down. Yuan Qian looked at the spot where Lin Dong had disappeared before he sighed softly. Then, he muttered to himself, "Hopefully, our dragon tribe has made a worthwhile bet, just like what Grand Elder said." Beast War region, Deep Lightning Mountain. The current Deep Lightning Mountain was clearly a lot livelier compared to 2 months ago, and their headquarters had also expanded tremendously. Countless powerful auras surged within the many mountains, while troops occasionally patrolled the skies, their sharp eyes scanning every part of Deep Lightning Mountain Range. Thanks to the fight that took place at Divine Item Mountain Range, Deep Lightning Mountain had completely established themselves in the Beast War region. In fact, their reputation was no longer inferior to that of the three great demon commanders' factions. Moreover, thanks to the mysterious divine palace that Lindorm had obtained, they had a large number of divine objects in their hands, a fact that was sufficient to make many factions jealous. Hence, soon after the recruitment order was given, various powerful individuals came swarming over in hopes of taking advantage of this opportunity to enter Deep Lightning Mountain to obtain a divine object. However, Deep Lightning Mountain was clearly wary of these individuals. Therefore, not only was the recruitment criteria incomparably harsh, but those recruited must provide a certain amount of contributions before they were given a divine object. This so-called contribution required these people to lead their men to fight for territory on behalf of Deep Lightning Mountain, or to collect various resources. In summary, it was not an easy task to fulfill this criteria. These powerful individuals were likewise well aware of this. However, a divine object was indeed rare to come by, and obtaining one would boost one's strength significantly. Moreover, Deep Lightning Mountain was no longer the same as before, and even the other three great demon commanders' factions did not dare to offend them. Therefore, joining Deep Lightning Mountain would be akin to gaining an additional layer of protection. As such, despite the harsh recruitment criteria, there was still a long queue to join. Thanks to the extremely energetic recruiting of Deep Lightning Mountain, it slowly became the focal point of the entire Beast War region. Everyone began to feel that this faction, which was once as stiff as a pool of still water, was now brimming with life and vitality. It was likely that Deep Lightning Mountain would become the most dazzling existence in the Beast War region in the future. On the peak of the main mountain of Deep Lightning Mountain were a series of towering halls. 100,000 feet large square lay in front of the most majestic-looking hall. At this moment, a black torrent-like mass of figures was silently seated on the square-like statues. Shocking and ferocious auras radiated from their bodies. These figures wore dark black armor which were covered in mysterious patterns. These patterns appeared to move as they breathed, while mysterious and powerful ripples vaguely spread from them. If one was to carefully observe this black torrent, one would discover that each and every individual of this over 1,000 army was breathing in unison. Tiny bits of aura rose from their bodies, before they gathered in midair, seemingly forming a giant 100,000 feet large darkness tiger. The giant tiger lay in the sky as if in a slumber. However, everyone could clearly sense how brutal it would be once it opened its eyes. Various other departments in Deep Lightning Mountain would occasionally walk past the square. However, their eyes were frightened and envious when they looked at the black torrent on the square. Everyone knew that the tiger-devouring army was the most powerful faction in Deep Lightning Mountain, and every person in this faction was equipped with a divine object. The scale of this army would make any faction jealous. Of course, the only group in the entire Deep Lightning Mountain who could enjoy such luxurious treatment was the tiger-devouring army. As a result, many people desperately tried to join. However, it was obvious that this was no simple task. In fact, their bloody and cruel selection method caused many experts, who thought highly of themselves, to feel their scalps turn numb. This square faced a majestic great hall. A few pairs of eyes within the Great Hall were currently staring at this tiger-devouring army with burning desire. Ha ha, Deep Lightning Mountain is really generous. It is likely that this tiger-devouring army alone will be able to match a Samsara stage expert. A couple of familiar-looking groups from various factions were seated in the large hall. If one was to take a closer look, one would realize that they were actually the Heaven Dragon Demon Commander, Ghost Condor Demon Commander and the Gold-Armored Golden Ape Demon Commander. Little Flame's metal tower-like body was seated in the leader's spot. A baleful aura lingered around his rough-looking face, and not even the slightest bit of fear was present when faced with the three strongest leaders in the Beast War region. His lips cracked open as he said, "The three of you did not come to my Deep Lightning Mountain merely to utter such nonsense, am I right?" Little Flame clearly did not have a good impression of these three who tried to stop them back at Divine Item Mountain range. Additionally, the current Deep Lightning Mountain was not afraid of them. Hence, Little Flame was not overly courteous when he spoke to them. The Heaven Dragon Demon Commander's veins bulged upon seeing Little Flame's attitude. However, he also knew that the current Deep Lightning Mountain was different from before. Forget about that abnormally powerful young man from the Celestial Demon Martin tribe, even this increasingly vicious Little Flame caused him to feel a little fear. After all, he understood that if Little Flame was to join forces with his tiger-devouring army, even he would have no choice but to retreat. Moreover, that fellow called Lindorm was the person whom he was most wary and even frightened of. None of these three brothers were pushovers. Ha ha, Commander Yang should know the reason why we came. That incident has created a huge uproar recently. The Golden Ape Demon Commander laughed bitterly and sighed. Little Flame had an indifferent expression as he replied, "The grudge between Mang Mountain region and you three great demon commanders has nothing to do with my Deep Lightning Mountain." Little Flame was naturally aware of the matter that the Golden Ape Demon Commander was referring to. This was because this matter had recently stirred a huge commotion in the entire Beast War region. In fact, the commotion stirred by this incident was not inferior to that of the incident back then at Divine Item Mountain Range. The source of this incident stemmed from the Mang Mountain region, which was located right next to the Beast War region. Like the Beast War region, the Mang Mountain region was also an extremely vast region and its size was definitely not inferior to that of the Beast War region. Moreover, both these territories typically did not interfere in each other's matters. However, ever since news of the incident at Divine Item Mountain Range spread, it clearly caused some repercussions. One of them was Mang Mountain region invading the Beast War region. The three great demon commanders, who held the highest positions in the Beast War region, were naturally the first to be affected by the invasion. The three great demon commanders were naturally rather furious over this matter. Mang Mountain region's action was undoubtedly a declaration of war against them. Nonetheless, despite their anger, their expressions became a little ugly when they recalled the strength of the Mang Mountain region. This Mang Mountain region was relatively famous in the demonic beast world. This was because the Mang Mountain region was one of the few regions that was completely unified. It was not as chaotic as the Beast War region, which had different factions competing against each other. Instead, only one faction existed in the entire Mang Mountain region. That faction was known as Mang Mountain. There were 5 great chiefs in Mang Mountain, and all of them were at the Samsara stage. Moreover, there were also many powerful individuals under them. Although the 3 great demon commanders' factions were strong, they were still significantly weaker than Mang Mountain. This was also why the 3 great commanders were having a headache. They could not defeat the other party nor could they choose to retreat. Hence, all they could do was to look for their previous enemy, Deep Lightning Mountain. After all, everyone had clearly witnessed the strength of Deep Lightning Mountain. If they joined forces, it was likely that Mang Mountain would become a little more wary. Commander Yang, owing to our reputation, us 3 great demon commanders will be the first to be hit when Mang Mountain invades the Beast War region. However, if we are defeated, the other factions in the Beast War region can only choose between submitting or fleeing. At that time, even Deep Lightning Mountain will not be able to escape unscathed. The Ghost Condor Demon Commander stared at Little Flame. He paused for a moment before continuing. Additionally, Mang Mountain's actions are likely related to the Divine Item Treasury. Since it is now in your Deep Lightning Mountain's possession, do you think that they will easily let you off after defeating us? I am aware that you have that Celestial Demon Martin brother. However, Mang Mountain also has a complicated background. Moreover, in order to obtain the Divine Item Treasury, it is likely they will not fear such things. Little Flame knitted his brows. He was naturally aware of this fact. However, it was a little foolish if he allowed the 3 great demon commanders to drag him onto the same boat. When trouble comes knocking, my Deep Lightning Mountain will handle it. There is no need for all of you to fret on our behalf. You? The Heaven Dragon Demon Commander involuntarily felt furious after witnessing Little Flame's indifferent attitude. He slammed his hands onto the stone table in front of him, instantly splitting it apart. However, rushing wind sounds immediately sounded in the large hall when the Heaven Dragon Demon Commander vented his anger. Promptly, many figures rushed out and stared sharply at the former. Even the tiger-devouring army in front of the hall suddenly let loose a low and deep tiger roar at the sky. Heaven Dragon Demon Commander, this is my deep lightning mountain. I'm afraid you cannot act as you please here. Little Flame stared at the Heaven Dragon Demon Commander with balefulness as he coldly shouted. The Heaven Dragon Demon Commander's face turned steely green. Despite the fury he felt in his heart, he could only let out a cold snort. After all, this was the headquarters of Deep Lightning Mountain and the tiger-devouring army was waiting right outside. Therefore, even someone as hot-tempered as himself had no choice but to back down. Commander Yang, you should be well aware of how serious this issue is. Please give us a reply. Mang Mountain has set up a sky battle arena and sent out the 5 great chiefs. However, we only have 3 individuals on our side. The Golden Ape Demon Commander helplessly said. Little Flame became quiet. A moment later, he finally said, "This is an extremely important matter. I will make my decision after Big Brother returns. He has already been gone for 2 months. I'm afraid that we do not have the luxury of time." The Golden Ape Demon Commander bitterly laughed. However, Little Flame's expression changed right after the Golden Ape Demon Commander spoke. He suddenly lifted his head to look at the entrance of the hall where a figure was slowly walking in. After which, a familiar laughter echoed in the hall. "Ha ha, it is so lively the moment I return. 3 great demon commanders, how have you guys been?" "Big Brother." Little Flame rose in surprise. The figure at the entrance to the hall moved and appeared at the empty leader position. He smilingly stared at the 3 great demon commanders. It was Lin Dong, who had just hurried back from the dragon tribe. Lin Dong looked at the 3 great demon commanders and smiled. "I am already aware of this matter. It is indeed difficult to deal with Mang Mountain, but it is not impossible." "Oh?" The Golden Ape Demon Commander trio were startled. Their eyes stared at Lin Dong in surprise. The reason why Mang Mountain is so powerful is because they are united. Therefore, there is a simple way to deal with them. All we need to do is to unite the entire Beast War region. Lin Dong smiled slightly. However, there was an indescribable feeling behind his smile. This was a good opportunity to expand Deep Lightning Mountain. This video will end here.